was about 19, 8 years old, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with that money. I had my G.I. Joe characters picked out. I had my Transformers and all this stuff. My dad overheard me one day talking to my friends about all this money I had and what I was going to do with it. And he was a very, very wise man. Your dad's a wise man. And he brought me to his office, and he said, Michael, I hear you got a little chunk of change there you want to spend. I said, yes, sir, I do. And I started rattling off again all the things I wanted to spend. And he says, well, let me introduce you to something. Let me show you something. He reaches into his briefcase, and he pulls out a Wall Street Journal. And he starts talking to me about stocks and bonds and how if I, instead of blowing my money on toys, I could invest it. And the thing that really caught me was every 3 months I can go to the mailbox, get a check in the mail for doing absolutely nothing, the dividend. So I was fascinated, and my dad said, you know what, to even make it more enticing to you, however much you decide to invest in stocks, I'll match it dollar for dollar. So at the age of 8 years old, I had my first 401k. I bought 10 shares of a company called Cleco, it's Central Louisiana Electric Company, and it just happened to be the company that my dad worked for. So whenever I'd get mad at him, he was not letting me do whatever I wanted to do, I say, Dad, now, I'm going to call your boss because I own the company you work for. Well, again, I just loved that concept and all that. So that next school year, I go down to the Target, the Kmart, I can't remember exactly which one, but I lined my bookshelves with Cokes and candies. I stuck them in my backpack, hop on the bus, and I start selling them to all the kids on the bus. I had my own little small business. Well, the school, they found out about it. And you can imagine what they did. They called up my mom and said, we appreciate your son's enthusiasm and entrepreneurship, but we got to shut you down. So at the age of 8 again, I had my first interaction with government regulation. And unfortunately, it never really stopped. I've experienced government regulation kind of impeding my ability to provide for my family many times throughout my life. I went to school, got my degree in accounting, became a CPA, went to work for Arthur Anderson over in Houston, Texas. Left there, went to work for VF Corporation, it's the world's largest apparel manufacturer. Did that for about 2 years and decided to do my own thing. Decided to kind of go out on my own, and I had this crazy idea to open up some barbershops. And y'all guys ever heard of Sport Clips haircuts?
Mm-hmm. You're opening one.
Yeah, right down the road.
Yeah.
So I used to get my hair cut there, and I loved it. And I decided, I'm gonna open up some of these Sport Clips. And I was 30 years old. I was the youngest franchisee. Bought into it, quit my job, and within about 9-10 years, I'd had 18 locations, 160 employees. 2013, we barely made it through the 2008 financial crisis. Anybody enjoy the year 2008? I've yet to meet anybody who really enjoyed that year. We barely make it through there, and then President Obama signs into law Obamacare. And for me, that was just kind of the straw or the anvil that broke the camel's back. I couldn't take it anymore, so I sold my business, and I was trying to figure out what to do the rest of my life. And everywhere I looked, I saw government regulations just impeding everything that I wanted to do. And I was sitting there at my desk, just really frustrated, really mad, and it just kind of hit me. Like, Michael, you can keep complaining about it, or you can do something about it. So I had another crazy idea. I was going to run for public office. And again, it's just so foreign to my personality and all that kind of good stuff that when I decided to do this, I got my wife's support. I called up my mom. I was like, Mom, I'm going to run for state senate here in Georgia. It took me 30 minutes to convince her I wasn't kidding, that I was really going to do this. And on top of that, it wasn't an open seat. And there was a Republican, a very staunch, established Republican that held the seat. He had the backing of the current lieutenant governor. He had the backing of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, almost every single senator down at the Capitol. And here I was. Nobody even knew me in my district. I was busy traveling about 5,000 to 7,000 miles a month running Sport Clips. I had 18 locations here in Georgia as well as in Alabama. I've got 3 kids. Oh, my wife is pregnant. She's going to have her baby on Wednesday, so I'm really excited about this. It's going to be a little girl. So I was busy running my business and running my family. So I just start showing up to these Tea Party meetings, to these GOP meetings saying, hey, I'm Michael Williams. I want to be your state senator. And they scratch their head and kind of look at me all awkward and say, who are you? And why in the world am I going to vote for you to be my state senator? Well, we got out there and we worked hard. We knocked on over 20,000 doors. I put in about $330-some thousand of my own money, and we ended up winning 66 to 34%. We beat that incumbent pretty bad. It's all of our research. It was the worst beatdown of an incumbent in Georgia history. And the reason I like to share that with people is because right now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are thinking, who is this guy? You know, and why am I gonna vote for him? And also, we're going up against a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people that have a lot better name recognition than I do, better known, not necessarily always in a positive light, but definitely better known than I am. And we've done it before. We beat the establishment because of the message, because of the hard work, and because, quite frankly, people are fed up with politics as usual. Completely and utterly fed up. One of the things that I kind of like to brag about and share with people is back in September of 2015, I was the first elected official here in Georgia to come out and support Donald Trump. I appreciate that now, and I love getting the applauses. But when I first did that, there was no applauses, none whatsoever. In fact, when I first came out with it, one of the guys, one of my supporters that was early on with me during my campaign, you know, he took a chance. He kind of came out and supported this unknown. He's calling me up, and again, this is, I get elected, I take office in January of 15, so this is like 9 months later. I come out and I support Donald Trump. He calls me up. He's like, Michael, what the heck are you doing? You're making me look like the biggest idiot for supporting you. I'm like, look, trust me. People are tired. They're fed up. And this guy is what we need right now. And is he not doing a great job? Yes. I mean, is he not what the first president since Ronald Reagan is actually doing the things that he says he's going to do? It's amazing. So again, I appreciate the applause. And another kind of funny story, I think. I got invited to speak at the Buckhead Young Republicans during the primary. And there was me, there was a guy supporting Ted Cruz, there was somebody else supporting Marco Rubio. And I was convinced the only reason that they invited me to come speak to them wasn't because they wanted to hear what I had to say. They wanted to actually see somebody that really supported Donald Trump. So I was more of a novelty going up there and speaking. But again, he won. And one of the reasons that I came out so early and so hard for Donald Trump was because I had just completed my first session down at the Gold Dome. And again, I'm coming into this brand new. Never been involved in politics before. I came down there. I was quiet. Still was pretty quiet. I'm becoming a whole lot more vocal now. But just listening and watching what's going on. After just my first session, I realized, again, how corrupt the culture is just in Atlanta. I can only imagine how it is down in D.C. And again, he was the only guy that I felt understood that and then had the you-know-whats to kind of take the fight to the people that we need to take the fight to. So I came out and supported him. So that's and then people were talking to me last summer about, Michael, what are you going to do? You seem like a good guy, you're an intelligent guy. What's your long-term plans here? And I was like, I don't know. We started talking about some different things, and people talked about, what about running for governor, secretary of state, different stuff like that. And it was after Donald Trump won that I just got a ton of people reaching out to me saying, look, we need a Trump guy running for governor. We need somebody that understands this. And just the amount of people kind of looking for somebody is what enticed me to get up here and to run for governor, because I know without a fact that if it's just me out there, there's no way I can win this thing. It's going to take everybody out there working hard, understanding what this is about, and getting behind this campaign, because again, they're fed up and tired of politics as usual. And it's going to take all of us to beat the establishment across the state of Georgia, just like we did in Forsyth County. So that's kind of a little bit about me, a little bit what's kind of got me to this point in my life. There's kind of four major issues or topics I'd like to talk about, and then we can take questions. The first one is, again, I'm a CPA. I love numbers. I'm just fascinated by them. And tax credits. Anybody here support tax credits? The movie industry, right? Right. Yeah. What happened this past session? We had over $500 million of tax credits that came to the Senate from the House. So these tax credits were passed out of the House, they came up to the Senate. And a lot of the reason for that is because of the success of the movie industry. Every time we talk about tax credits down there, we're supposed to look at what's going on in the movie industry. We've got all this, these great things, these Pinewood Studios coming in, $7 million of economic investment here in Georgia. There's a little bit of difference between the movie tax credit and all these other tax credits that are being talked about. Part of that is the infrastructure that was built here before tax credits were even talked about, and that was done by Tyler Perry. Long ago, he had, not long ago, but a while back, he had a vision of what Georgia can be in the movie industry. And he started laying groundwork for a bigger move to come in. Also, Georgia has the busiest airport in the world. It's very, very easy to get here to Atlanta and to Georgia. Also, the weather here in Georgia. You can film year-round, almost. You know, it's very conducive to filming, as well as the different locations, the geography. You've got rural Georgia, you've got metropolitan Atlanta, you've got rivers, you've got lakes, you've got the ocean, the mountains. So movie industry, they can come in and they can get a lot of different looks and feel here in Georgia to do their filming. So that's part of what has kind of helped that industry thrive here. But all tax credits are not the same, not at all. And I want to kind of go through a couple of different tax credits that we fought pretty hard down in the Capitol, and I want to tie that into what I refer to as the process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and why that's important. Before I do that, do we have any college football fans in here? Yeah, a little bit, some college football fans. I'm going to say a name, and this name, it generates emotion, either hate and disgust or admiration, and that name is Nick Saban. All right, people either love him because he wins so much or hates him because he wins so much. He's the coach of Alabama football. The reason I bring his name up is when he was first hired on to Alabama, he spent the first 2 or 3 years, every time he was talking to his players, every time he was talking to the media, every time he was talking to the Booster Club, talking about process. He understood that if you want to have a championship team year in and year out, you have to get a process in place that works. You go out there, you get the recruits, you put them in this process, you get a winning team. You know what the result's going to be. And who can argue, again, whether you like Alabama or not, every single year they put a very, very good football team on the field because of the process. In Georgia politics, down at the Capitol, there's a process. Some of you might have heard it called sausage making process, right? And they like to say it's nasty, it's dirty, it's ugly. You don't really want to see it, but the truth is, and what I've kind of learned is, it's not that you don't want to see it, it's that they don't want you to see what really goes on down there. And again, I'm going to share just 2 examples, 2 bills that illustrate the process. One of them is Uber. You have anybody in here that uses Uber? I know I use Uber. Yes, it's great. There was a bill, again, generated in the House. The taxi industry, they don't like Uber. Right? They're trying to fight Uber. They've been fighting Uber for a couple of years now, and they had this great idea to convince these legislators, Republican legislators in the House, that Uber has an unfair advantage over taxis. And the only way to make it fair is to tax Uber. So, Republican legislators draft a bill to tax Uber, pass it out of the House, send it over here to the Senate. Me, I'm on the Finance Committee. It's where all the tax bills go through, where it's supposed to go through. A group of other senators, we decided, you know what? We are actually Republicans, and we're going to do something Republican in nature. So we took that bill, we stripped it out, and instead of taxing Uber, we said, let's make the playing field level and remove the tax on taxis. It's a novel idea. So we changed the bill out, we passed it out of the Finance Committee, and it goes to the Rules Committee. You're laughing because I think I know why you're laughing over there. The Rules Committee, it's this holding committee. We have standing committees that are basically subject driven that bills are sent to. They pass those committees. That's where you have the open comments. You're supposed to perfect the bills in these Rules Committee. Every single bill that passes out of a standing committee goes and sits in the Rules Committee until it's called upon to be voted on the Senate floor. Well, what do you think happened to this new bill that removed the tax on taxis?
Probably nothing.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It died. Why? Why would a very Republican bill that removes regulation, removes taxes, die in a Republican-controlled Senate Rules Committee?
They
Well,
put no new taxes, but they sure ain't giving up the old ones.
well, again, the taxi lobbyists, they don't want that bill. They don't want that bill. And then there's nobody down there, lobbying for lower taxes. It's all these other guys lobbying for different things. So it sits there because they know if it were to come out and go onto the Senate floor, what would all the Republicans have to do? We would have to vote for it. And if we pass it in the Senate and we send it over to the House, what do all the Republican senators over there have to do? They have to vote for it. It goes to the governor's office, and who knows what happens there. But nonetheless, it would pass. And the lobbyists, they don't want that to happen. So again, it's designed to act as a holding spot there for bills to die that they don't want. Yeah. Now, on the flip side, okay, so that's where a good bill goes to die. On the flip side, we had a bill. It was the Georgia Rural Agriculture Jobs Act. Again, they always give these bills these nice, elaborate titles that kind of make you feel good when you're voting on them. And it was sold as a bill that's going to help encourage investments in rural Georgia, because we all know rural Georgia needs help right now. They're suffering, and we need to do some things to help them out. So again, all the tax bills, they start in the House, they come over to the Senate. This bill came over. Again, it's a tax bill, it's in finance. I'm on the finance committee, and I start to dive into this bill to try to figure out what it really does. And I'm going to try to explain it to you. It's very complicated, but I'll try to explain it to you in as simple terms as I can. First of all, the state of Georgia is going to give $60 million in tax credits. Most of that's going to come from the insurance premiums. Here in Georgia, all these insurance companies have to pay a tax on the insurance premiums. It's several $100 million a year. $60 million of that they're going to give to a group of investors that they can put into a fund. And that fund needs to be $100 million before it actually comes into place. So $60 million of it comes from these tax credits. The other 40, I'm just going to say these two guys right here. They come up with $40 million to put into this fund. So you got $40 million from these guys, $60 million basically from us, from the tax credits. So you have a fund now that's going to be invested in rural Georgia worth $100 million. Who owns that fund? You would think these two guys would own about 40%, and the state of Georgia would own the other 60%. Not so. These two guys, they just took their $40 million investment and made 60 more. They own 100% of that fund. That doesn't seem very fair to me. Okay, but now, what do they have to do to get that money? They just can't put there and then take it out the next stage. There's some guidelines on what they have to do. One is they have to keep it invested in rural Georgia for 7 years. All right, and then they go through kind of the different investments that they can invest in. Rural Georgia, agriculture business, equipment and agriculture. In the very last line, the very last little section, that's where it kind of gets you. It says, anything that supports agriculture. That can be an ad agency. That can be a staffing agency. That can be pretty much anything, anywhere in the world. And all they have to do is keep it invested, for 7 years. How does that really help rural Georgia? I didn't see how it helped rural Georgia. I don't believe that will help. It'll help these two guys quite a bit. They will walk away with a ton of money in 7 years. Very little of that is actually going to help rural Georgia. So that comes to the Finance Committee. I'm sitting in there. The author of the bill is explaining it, and we just start drilling them. And it dies. It doesn't make it out of the Finance Committee. So I'm thinking, all right, good. We stopped the bad bill. Well, guess what? Exactly. It was resurrected. And you guys are giving my speech up here. No, exactly. There was a bill. It was the governor's bill. The lobbyists that were supporting this bill, they found a governor's bill, and they attached it onto a governor's bill. Now, down there it's understood that you don't vote against a governor's bill. There's going to be some consequences if you decide that you want to vote against the governor's bill. You might get your bills vetoed. You might get funding taken away from your district if you go against the governor. So they attach it to this bill. And again, they wait They wait. We're down there for 40 days. We have 40 days of session down there. We passed about 80 to 100 bills the last 2 days of session. About 80% of all the bills come out the last 2 days. Again, that's by design. We could do it earlier, but they wanted the last couple of days to rush things through, to get people anxious, because again, to kind of explain why, we talk about bills every day before we go into the session to vote. We have a caucus meeting, we talk about these bills. This bill comes up, and again, in the caucus meeting, I'm like, guys, this is a bad bill, this is what it does, we don't need to vote for it. I probably should not have done that, because what that did, that made leadership and those that are kind of pushing this bill aware that I'm going to speak out against this bill on the floor, because people need to know what they're voting on. The bill comes up, it's about 6 o'clock at night on the very last day of session. I push my little button. I want to go speak. I want to fight against this bill. They don't get to me. They allow the author to speak. They allow, I think, one, maybe two other people to get there and speak. And then another senator stands up, does a procedural move where he says, Mr. President, I want to call the previous question. What that basically means is debate ends and we vote. We have to pass that measure. But again, 6 o'clock at night, we've got all these bills. All these other senators, what do they want? They want to move on to the next bill. They don't want to debate this bill anymore. They need their bill to come up so that they can vote on it. So the majority of the senators vote yes, call the previous question. I don't get to speak. It goes up on for the vote. The first time it fails. Then they ask for an immediate reconsideration. They go in, they get some of the senators that were not on the floor at the time, they rally the troops a little bit, and it ends up passing. And was signed by the governor not too long ago. So you have two bills. One that serves the interest of the people that dies in rules. Another that serves special interest. That through the system, through that process, they're able to use it to get it passed. That is what we have to change down there. We have to make people aware of how it works and why it's not your guys' interests that are being talked about. In fact, one of the things that just really, really frustrates me is there's been times when we're down there, we're talking and we're discussing bills, and somebody brings up the comment, like, no, we got all these lobbyists down here, bringing all these ideas, talking to us about bills. Where's the lobbyists for the people? I'm sitting there scratching my head thinking, come on, it's us. We're supposed to be the lobbyists for the people. We're supposed to represent the people's interest. And I do want to take a moment to say there are a lot of really good legislators, House representatives and senators down there that are trying to do the right thing. They just get lost in this process and they don't always understand what's going on. So while I'm up here kind of bashing the process, I don't want you guys to feel like I'm bashing all of the elected officials down there, because there really are a lot of good people down there. A handful that are just kind of manipulating the system, but again, it's that process that we have to change. Also, education. Education is a very, very hot topic right now in Georgia, and we have too many failing schools. We're in the bottom as far as ratings across the country. One of the things that I feel very, very, very passionately about is the number one success factor in the education of a school and their success is the involvement of the parent. Hands down, across the board. We have got to get the parents involved in the education of their children. There are too many parents out there that feel like educating their child is the government's responsibility. It's a babysitter. You send them to school, they take care of them until they get home from work, and they educate them, and they don't think twice about it. We have to change that mentality, because no matter what government does, we're not going to do it right. It's up to the parents. Some of the things that I believe that can help do that is, one, every single school board member, every single state school board member is appointed by the governor. We elect their school board superintendent, but the state school board members are appointed by the governor. So who do you think controls education in Georgia? It's the governor. No matter who the governor is, it's the governor that is going to control education. We need to elect our state school board members. We need to start that process again to make the people aware that it's their choice, it's their decision on how their kids are educated, and they need to take that back from the government. Also, school, I kind of laugh as I'm thinking about this in my head, but school choice. I know Mary Kay, she's like, well, do you believe in real school choice or the fake school choice? And only people who know Mary Kay will understand that, but I believe in the real school choice. Right now we have a monopoly in education. It's controlled by the government, and we need to allow for our parents to have more choices out there in the education of their children. So that's like kind of a high level of some of the things I feel like we need to do here in Georgia to help move education forward here in our state. And then lastly, the economy, jobs. We're going to hear a lot of people talking about what they're going to do to help bring jobs here into Georgia. And one of the things that we talked about at Mary Kay's house this evening was how right now you'll hear tons of elected officials talk about how Georgia is the #1 state in the country to do business. And at this dinner, I said, so how many of you guys own a small business? And there's about 5, 6 kind of said that they own a small business. I asked them, I said, do you feel that Georgia's the best state in the country to do business? I don't think a single one of them said yes. Because I believe Georgia is the #1 state in the country for big business to do business. Because Georgia is basically selling off with tax credits everything we have here in Georgia to those people that want to come in with the big businesses and bring in jobs. Something that a lot of people don't necessarily know that I'm doing my best to get out there is in 2006, Georgia was ranked 26th as far as earnings per capita. We are now 40th in earnings per capita. We've added a lot of jobs. We've had a lot of jobs come to Georgia. What's the quality of those jobs? So much so that we have dropped significantly in the earning per capita. So we don't need just more jobs. We need quality jobs. We need to find ways to build wealth here in Georgia. Excuse me? Oh. The way you build wealth, it's actually going out there and creating businesses. It's through entrepreneurship. I don't know too many people, unless you're in one of those C offices, that get wealthy working for another company. It's all through going out there and creating jobs. And when you really look at the numbers, that's where all the real jobs are created. Most of these big businesses, they just cycle through. You know, you buy somebody, you cut back, you hire over here. There's a net impact on big business jobs. It's the creation of new business that generates jobs. And you look at Georgia. One of the things that just baffles me about Georgia is we have so many great opportunities here in Georgia. We have 87% of all credit card transactions are processed here in Georgia. 87% of them. We are the fintech capital of the world. Why can't we take that and become the world leader in financial transactions, in finance? I don't know how many of you guys have heard of blockchain, but that's a new technology that's going to come out and revolutionize contracts and, again, the financial world. We got investments going on in there. Also, supply chain. Any business owner understands the importance of supply chain management in logistics. Again, we have the busiest airport in the country. We've got UPS, Delta, Georgia Pacific. We got all this subject matter experts. Why are we not taking some of these things, using those to advance the cause and become world leaders in these fields? That's what we need to do. Not give away things through tax credits, but become world leaders in some of these businesses and industries. So that's a little bit about me, about what I want to do. I think I'm being told I'm out of time, so I'll take any questions if there's time for that.
Yes, we have several good questions here, and the first one, I'll leave it with you, Sue, in case you need to reference it. Where do you stand, this is an easy one, where do you stand on gambling in Georgia?
Well, first of all, one thing that I learned pretty quickly down there, again, like they give bills kind of these fancy titles, anything that's controversial, they try to tie a heartstring to it. So for gambling, it was saving hope. It's all about saving hope. Let's not talk about gambling. Let's not talk about some of the plagues on society that gambling is. Let's only talk about how it's going to save hope. Let me tell you a little bit about hope. The bill that originally introduced hope into Georgia required that 35% of the proceeds that come in through the lottery goes to fund hope. Any idea what percent is being spent right now? 23. Okay. The Georgia Lottery, it's a $4 billion business right now. What's 12% of $4 billion? $480 million. All they were talking about for casino bringing in was about 250. We don't need casinos to save hope. We need to follow the law. That's what we need to do. And then also, economics. Anybody that understands economics knows whenever you have an environment, whenever you have an industry there that is saturated, you've got escalating costs, and you pour more money onto it, what happens then? Prices skyrocket even more. Do we want to see increased costs in higher education? So the bill they had down there at this past session was a horrible piece of legislation, so I do not at all support that. Long-winded way to say no, I don't support it.
I got about 12 questions here, and we're going to get through all of them, so it's up to you when you leave tonight. Based on the length of the answer. Okay, touching on rural Georgia that you mentioned, what can be done to economically and other ways help rural Georgia that's been suffering and losing population?
Sure. The biggest industry across the board in Georgia is agriculture. Agriculture. Now, I want to read off just a couple of things. Food, the production of food. 50% of all the food that's grown is never sent to production. It's lost. A third that's sent from production to retail is lost. A third from that's sent from the retail to the consumer is lost. Of all the food produced across this planet, only 20% makes it to the consumer. Talking about being a world leader, Georgia can take their place in the world as far as how do we take this food that's being produced, not just here in Georgia, but across the planet, get it to the consumer faster. Imagine if we were to do that. Do you think that would help rural Georgia? You better believe that would help rural Georgia. Also, we've got this thing called the internet, and then the Internet of Things is coming about. And you've got Georgia Tech that's working on all kinds of different instruments that measure the nutrients in the soil, that when you need to water it, when you need to do different things. We have the opportunity here in Georgia, again, to become a world leader, and not just food production, but getting it out to the people so we can feed the world. I believe, hands down, we can help rural Georgia if we just focus on that.
Okay, this one's a little different. This one says, how does God inform your public policy, and not specifically as to your personal life, but rather how does your understanding of God and His Word contribute to your knowledge of public policy and how you vote in the legislature and how you would govern as governor?
Sure. One thing that I know without a shadow of a doubt is that God lives. I know that Jesus is the Christ and the Savior of the world, without a doubt. And I know that those truths are true no matter who's governor, no matter who's president, no matter who is controlling this planet. And as long as we keep a hold of those fundamental truths that are out there, let them be your guiding star. Let them be your guiding light. And that's what I go up. I want to find out, and I want to live by truth that is out there.
You really are moving fast through these. This is a two-parter. Are you active in your local church? What church do you attend in your community? And also, well, I'll let you do that, and then we'll do the second part.
Okay, sure. Yes, I am very active in my church. It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I've been a Sunday school teacher, a youth leader, young men's teacher from the group, so very, very active in my church.
I'm just coming up here so they can pick me up on the microphone back there. So, would you describe yourself as a conservative, libertarian? It says moderate, but I know you wouldn't do that. And to expand on that a little, who would you consider some of your heroes or inspirations from the past, conservative heroes in the past? Reagan, of course, is the obvious one. Someone other than Reagan.
Well, that's really a hard question for me because, again, I didn't grow up in politics, and I've been kind of learning politics for the past couple of years. So the only person that I really knew was Reagan. And what I remember growing up is my dad I know right now Dan Rather's kind of a bad word, but my dad used to love watching Dan Rather, and I'd lay there on the floor watching Dan Rather, my dad. He'd come in about 5:15, 5:30, we'd get there and start watching the news, and anytime Ronald Reagan came up on the TV, it made my dad smile. It made my dad happy, and I remember that. And I also remember I'm a huge Star Wars geek. I love Star Wars, and I used to love watching Ronald Reagan talk about Star Wars. I had no idea what it meant. I just knew I liked, Han Solo and Luke, and there's my president talking about Star Wars. So that's who I really liked.
I didn't ask that question, but would you answer the first part of that question also?
If you were conservative or moderate, definitely a conservative or libertarian. No, very, very. In fact, on our website and our cards and all that, our slogan is fearless conservative, because for far too long, the conservative Christian movement has been quiet and has been almost scared to stand out and to say something. They've just kind of let things go on the way they've gone on. And it's time for us to stand up and not be scared to be politically incorrect, not be scared of the backlash that we might get for standing up for our principles and our beliefs. So very much a conservative.
And following in that vein, what's your thinking on the RFRA bill that was passed last year, and where do you think we should go going forward with that legislation?
Sure. First of all, I was a co-sponsor of the bill that Josh McCoon had dropped 2 years ago for RFRA. Supported it all the way through the process when it became the pasture protection, all the different other reviews and all that of the bill. So I support 100%. Marty Harbin, I think a lot of your guys as senators, he had an idea which is brilliant in my mind, and I don't know if it's his or your guys or somebody else, but he presented a bill this past session that was the identical bill to the bill that Governor Deal voted on when he was in Congress. I'm one of the few senators that actually signed on to that. And again, talking about the process, it was me, Marty Harbin, a few other of us dropped the bill. And then last session, it went to the Judiciary Committee to kind of go through the process. This past session, it went to the Rules Committee, straight to the Rules Committee, where it never had a hearing, nothing. So yeah, exactly. It's dead on arrival. And I believe in the bottom of my heart that everybody across this country that loves America understands the importance of religious liberties, understands the importance of being able to express and hold our religious values dear. What's happened is the far left, the extreme left, has taken this and morphed it into something that it's not, that we're using it as a weapon to discriminate. I don't know a single person that believes that and wants to do that. And it's going to take us sitting down with some people trying to figure out a way that we can come to an agreement on what we need to do in this country to defend and to support religious freedom without it coming out as a anti-whatever, just American as apple pie, religious freedom.
How will you put parents back in charge of education?
Well, first of all, I wish I could force parents to be involved in education. Unfortunately, you can't make parents do things. All we can do is kind of try to educate them, let them know again the importance of their involvement in education, give them the tools. Again, right now, whenever your child is 5 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old, you're getting them ready to go to kindergarten. What choice do you have on where you send them? Do you want to fork out money for a private school, or do you want to send them to the public school? If we started to give these parents more opportunities and more choices for their kids, where are they going to spend their money? How are these kids going to be educated? You give them these opportunities and these choices, it automatically forces them to become involved. So I feel like as we give them more choices, they're allowed to kind of take that next step. And again, the process of going and voting for your state school board members, again, just having that on the top of your mind that, this is our responsibility, it's local choice, and it's up to the parents to be involved. So that's just a little bit of how I would try to get parents more involved.
I don't know who submitted this, but I think they might be referring to something like school vouchers or tuition tax credits, something like that.
Do I support that?
Yeah.
Again, talking about school choice and the parents, how they're going to spend their money. There was a bill, I know Mary Kay, she kind of taught me a little bit about this bill, how I thought it was school choice, but because it had the strings attached, it wasn't necessarily school choice, but the concept was you create an education savings account, that the state portion of education goes into this education savings account, and then the parent is able to decide where that money is spent. If they want to send it to the public school, they want to send it to a private school, charter school, wherever it is, you create that savings account there from the state portion of education, and again, allow the parent to decide where that money is spent. So yes, I support vouchers and various versions of that as well.
Can you pick me up from here on the okay? Would you encourage passage of legislation requiring a review process of all state spending by state agencies? I believe this is SB 210, the Sunset Advisory Committee bill. And the 3rd District also passed a resolution in support of that this year as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am not familiar with that specific piece of legislation, but what I am very familiar with is audit reports. And again, I'm kind of a geek in some areas, and the state of Georgia, they have an internal audit department, and they go out and they audit these state agencies, and they issue what's called a single audit report. It just kind of goes through all these state agencies and lists out these control deficiencies. And I actually got a copy of the 2016. It's about this thick, and it's, again, anybody who loves numbers and accounting, it's a very interesting read. To kind of simplify it, the results of that audit report, had it been a public company, whether it was Delta, Home Depot, the executives of that company would have been fired based upon the result that the state of Georgia had. There are tremendous lacks of controls, money being spent that they can't account for, money being collected, supposed to be going to the Treasury, but being spent in the wrong departments. There is an absolute lack of accountability and controls in government spending. And I was sitting down with somebody in the internal audit department the other day, asking them, I said, look, in my reading and understanding of this, we have hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in efficiencies that we can collect here in Georgia if we just run these departments like a business. And the guy said, absolutely. So again, I don't know specific about that, but we do need to do a better job of making sure that we manage our money and where it's spent here in Georgia.
We have, just a couple more, so we're doing good. Last year, we had a constitutional amendment vote on the Judicial Qualifications Commission. How did you vote on that? I know there was an amendment and a bill, but the amendment was the most important.
Yeah.
How did you vote on that?
And one.
Yeah, and why?
As Mary Kay mentioned, last session I was working very hard on a bill that would give school board members across the state their voice back. And what I mean by that is, up until last year when this bill passed, once a vote was made by a school board, if a school board member opposed that bill, they could not speak out against it. They were silenced, or else there'd be ethics complaints and all kinds of other things. I was working very, very hard to get that bill passed because I believed it was a very important piece of legislation. As we've all talked about, if you don't vote for a governor's bill, there's consequences, there's repercussions. And I knew that this was going to go to the people for a vote. I voted for it so that I could get this other piece of legislation passed.
What is your stance on marijuana legalization, and to broaden that a little? Obviously, you got medical marijuana, you've got decriminalization, and then you've got legalization. Use it for only medical, decriminalize, and just use it for whatever you want. So 3 different types. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah. Let me start with the easiest one first. I do not support the complete legalization of marijuana for recreational use. I don't think there's a place in Georgia for that. Right now, in fact, I was reading a report today that said Georgia has had the most admittances into hospitals for opioid abuse across the country. We have a serious issue with opioid abuse here in Atlanta and in Georgia, and I feel like legalizing marijuana would only add to that. So I do not support the complete legalization of marijuana for recreational use. Medical marijuana, the cannabis oil, again, like we talked about, people use some of these issues for again, it's all about the kids. You know, we have these parents that come down with these kids that are suffering, and the medical marijuana can help alleviate these kids' suffering. And from a very personal standpoint, back in the summer of 2015, my son had a very, very bad accident. He hit his head skateboarding, rushed him to the ER, and they had to cut open his scalp, basically take off the skull, and allow his brain to expand. And they didn't think that he was going to live. They thought he was going to die. And if they did live, that they thought he was going to have all kinds of mental problems, be handicapped, disability, all this other kind of good stuff. And at that moment in time, I would have done anything for my son if it would make him better. So I definitely understand where some of these parents are as far as seeing their child suffer and wanting to fix that. So I am for the medical cannabis oil, but what I ask is give us a bill that will do what it is that you want, allow us to vote on that bill, and be done with it. Just let's take it, let's attack it, let's handle it, and then be done with it, and not allow it to be used to advance the recreational use of marijuana. So that's where I stand on that.
See here, just get a couple more. Actually, this handwriting's a little difficult to read. I'll go to the next one and come back to that. In 2015, why did you vote in favor for the gas tax bill?
Sure. 2015, that was my very, very first session down there. And I went down there wanting to kind of see what it was all about. Again, I had no background, no experience about what it was like down there. And the number one focus in that session was getting this tax passed. And as we talked to other legislators, as we talked to constituents back home, there was not a single person that disagreed that transportation is an issue here in Georgia. The issue was, where's the funding going to come from? How are we going to pay for it? And there was myself, Marty Harbin, Mike Crane, Josh McCoon, John Albers, Judson Hill. There was a small contingency of us in the Senate that we wanted to take the funds from the general fund, because at this time we had gone from about a $15.5 billion budget to, I believe this year it was 19, approaching $20 billion. So in just the course of a couple of years, it was growing to $4 or $5 billion. There's plenty of money in there to take it from the general fund and apply it towards the transportation issues. As session again is winding down, we're having these fights, and leadership said, look, tax reform and transportation, they're two different issues. We can't tackle both of these at the same time. Let's get the tax passed this year. Next year, we'll tax reform. So they create this elaborate scheme where we're going to have a study committee in the bill. We're going to appoint these people, and the next session we'll come back and we'll vote to reduce the tax. So I bought into it. I voted for it. Well, guess what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened at all. So I bought a hook, line, and sinker, but I won't do it again. And something else that I want to kind of mention, my voting record. If you go back and you look at my first year there, my second year there, and then my third year there, what you'll see is kind of opposite of what you see with most legislatures. Most legislators, the longer you're down there, the conservative vote, it kind of goes down. With my record, my first year was my most non-conservative year in voting, and my vote actually went up. There was a sharp learning curve as I figured out what was going on down there, and something that I'm super proud of. I think just a couple days ago, I was rated 100% on the ACUF, American Conservative Union Federation, 100% and the most conservative senator, not just this past year, but when you look at my lifetime voting record, I am the most conservative senator down there based upon my lifetime voting record.
And last question, and I'll just summarize it. It's a bit of a chicken scratching. Basically, we've never had a Republican governor since Reconstruction here in Georgia. We've had 2 Democrat turncoats, but we've never actually had a Republican, certainly never had a conservative. We are feeling understandably burned. Mm-hmm. what concrete ways can you assure us that we're not going to get burned by you?
First of all, there's no certainties in life. I mean, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that this is a concrete way that you're going to know that I'm going to go down there and do exactly what there's no way to do that. No way whatsoever. What I can point to, again, is my voting record, is the curve that I've learned, the process, the things I'm telling you today. How many other candidates are out there talking about the process that we need to change? And then kind of lastly, we are going to hit the establishment head on. Anybody here at the convention or watch my speech at the convention? Just to kind of tell you a little bit about what happened, and then we'll close out. Again, nobody knows who I am. I'm a relative unknown. You know, Michael Williams, they know Michael Williams in high school, maybe worked with one, but they don't know this Michael Williams who's running for governor. So we knew that we had to kind of do something different. We knew that we had to kind of stand out and separate ourselves from everybody else and tell people what we are really about, kind of help answer that question. I put my speech out about 10 minutes before when I thought I was going to go on stage. I want everybody to kind of have it, to be able to look at it, to kind of follow along with me. There's all kinds of chaos at the convention. It ended up being about 2 hours after we put my speech out there that I went up to give it. Well, in that time, I'm sitting there in that back room, and I'm seeing Casey Cagle intently reading his phone. And you can just kind of see the look on his face. You can tell when Casey's mad. And he was not happy at all. He jumps up, he grabs his speech, he storms out of that back room, and it wasn't 20, 30 minutes later. Person kind of walks up to me, you know, how am I doing? You know, just a little small talk, and says, Are you seriously going to run? You know, anything we can do to change your mind? I'm like, no, I'm good, I'm going to run. He said, well, what if we make you appropriations chair? Will you support Casey? I was like, no, I'm good. You know, we're going to run this thing. And what really kind of drove home to me that this guy was serious was, he says, did you ask your wife? I was like, what do you mean did I ask my wife? Does she know that you'll be appropriations chair if you don't run? I was like, no, I don't need to ask my wife. I get the full support of my wife, and we're going to do this thing. So I go up on stage, and I tell everybody at that convention exactly what happened back there. Okay? Because that is what has to happen. We have to make people aware of what is going on. If we don't do that, nothing is going to change. So for that one fact that I'm putting everything I have, I'm financing a lot of this campaign, I'm putting my time, again, my wife is having a baby in less than a week, I'm here down here talking to you guys, I'm committed to this. I get nothing out of this. I am 150% committed to doing what is right and to actually bringing the first real conservative governor to Georgia. And that's about all I know to do, is to commit to you guys, to go out there and to expose what's really going on down there. And then you guys just have to take it on faith, and I'm going to do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any more comments?
Yep.
Oh, you got a
You got
question
more
from
time?
the audience? Okay, go right
I
ahead.
come up with a couple questions.
Okay.
Who do you think is going to be your most formidable opponent?
I would rather not say. I don't think it's going to be Casey.
And you will not have to resign.
No.
You'll be able to complete this next session.
No, wait, I don't have to resign. No.
Any idea who will replace you? You recruiting someone?
We're working with a few people, yeah. Yeah.
One of the questions I'd like to know is, where does Georgia stand as far as debt? You know, we have a balanced budget, but I know it's fake, or I feel like it's fake.
Yeah, no, again, I've been trying to dive into these financial statements, and it is extremely hard to figure out exactly how much debt Georgia has, because you have general obligation debt, you've got revenue bond, you've got all these authorities out there that are issuing debt with a guarantee by the state. I figure right now there's about $20 billion that the state of Georgia is on the hook for.
State of Georgia,
It's on the hook for $20 billion.
that's gotta worry us.
I know it's ridiculous.
I'm constantly hearing that bills are piggybacked upon other bills.
Mhm.
Why is something not done so that there's only one bill allowed per vote?
Again, it goes back to the process, and it's designed that way. The people that are controlling what,
I understand
yeah.
that, that, but who has brought it up that this be changed? Can it not be changed?
It
That
can
you
be.
only allow- So everyone I hear that uses that as an excuse, well, I had to vote for this because it was the right thing to do. But then you're bringing in sometimes, not talking about you
Yeah.
specifically, but then another bill is brought in that is devastating for people on
Yeah,
another
no,
end of that spectrum.
again-
Why doesn't somebody bring it up to end that?
Until we get somebody in the governor's office that is willing to take a stand against that, it's not going to change because it
You're willing
serves.
to take a stand
Yes,
against
ma'am.
it.
Yes, ma'am. That whole process has to change. I've already committed to people that I'm not going to have governor floor leads. One of the things that drives me insane is when we're in caucus meeting talking about these bills, and the comment comes up, well, where's the governor stand on this bill? Well, who cares where the governor stands on this bill? We're the Senate, they're the House. Let us deliberate and pass a bill that we like, and then let the governor decide. So it's tone at the top, and it's going to take somebody that's going to change that.
Brent,
Anybody? Oh,
I have a closed-end question.
Sure.
And it's in two parts. What, do you know the total employee population of the state of Georgia? How many people are employed and on the state payroll? And what is that payroll?
I don't know the answer to that question. From my perspective, I believe it's too high,
Too many.
but I don't know what the number is.
Every time you do one of these things, you have to staff it. And
Yeah.
None
Yeah.
of the old things.
No, there are so many organizations out there, government entities and all that we can just get rid of. I think there's one person that handles aviation, logging. Why do we need him? Get rid of him. The governor has their own student achievement or something like that out of the governor's office. We have a board of education. Yeah, Office of Student Achievement. Why does the governor need that? Let's use the board of education and that to kind of run things.
He's
So
got a
there's lots
cousin,
of.
he's got a cousin he's got to give a job to. That's
Well, again,
why.
no, we're going to go in and we're going to run the state like it is a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, the governor has an office of early learning, so the governor is the sole person in charge of all of learning birth through 5.
Yeah.
Not the state board of education.
No, and that
That's wrong.
exactly. It needs to be the board of education. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask you about these development authorities, and, you know, we had a one here that gave a $200 million to Pinewood, but it was done with such secret that our school board did not
Didn't even
know
know about it.
about it. And, you know, the school board, one of the school board members told me that, you know, they had sold a building to Pinewood. They would not have sold it at such a reduced rate had they known about that development. But I don't know if you're aware of this one, which just shocks me. Mystery firm seeks $50 million for jet, and this is in Cobb County. And I think you've already mentioned the gentleman's name. We're pretty sure it's his airplane. But I mean, you know, why are development authorities? Why do they have that power? You know, and how do
Yeah. Let me answer that question by telling a little story. Is it this past? I think it was this past session. I was coming out of caucus meeting, walking down the stairs with a member of leadership, and I leaned over to him and I said, Senator, you know what? I just realized what my biggest weakness is down here. And he's like, yeah, what's that? I said, I believe in constraints. And down here, nothing is impossible. If they can imagine, if they can figure a way to get it done, they will get it done. And they use things like these development authorities and all these other mechanisms they have in place to be able to skirt around public comment and public view. And again, it's all by design to get the things that they want done. And until, again, we get somebody in leadership that calls them out and says we cannot do this anymore. If we're going to have a development authority, make it open to the people so that they know what's going on. One last question around that. Again, I've been studying and reading these audit reports and these financial statements for Georgia. And again, this report was issued that completely shows the ineptness and the lack of controls and accountability on the financials for the state of Georgia. Again, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars being wasted every single year. This report was identified as being an exception to the Open Records Act. Okay, because I've had people ask me, how come nobody knows about this report? How come nobody, because I talk to activists that have been in this for a long time, like, I've never seen this report before. Well, when they do open records requests, they don't have to include this report. It's online. It's buried online somewhere, and you can go directly to it if you know where it is and how to find it. But they purposely exempted it from open records. It's just not right. All right, well, thank you again for allowing me to come. Appreciate it.
All right, I know that you all found this to be a very informative evening with Senator